Hi there maple fans, and in this series of videos I'll be sharing what I do throughout an entire year on a monthly basis. Please note that these months are based on UK timings, but of course can easily be adapted to anywhere else in the world. So following on from my March video, I thought it was a real opportunity to show people exactly what I do at this time of year, because it really sets you up for the future months, to be honest. I talked at length about, not repotting, holding on fire on that. However, this is a great time to feed, tidy up and do work with your Acers. And this video is all about that really. So here's some of the kit that I use. The chair of course is really essential because it takes a while to get round to what I've got 50-60 maples now. But we'll have a look at this one first, and this is the typical sort of state that it's in this time of year. Can't really read the label. We've got bits of stuff everywhere. A bit of a faded thing there as well. That's the original label from about 4 years ago now. So bought from a supermarket, believe it or not, but a great tree nonetheless. So this will be a bit of a deep dive into this tree. However, later on in the video, so please watch to the end. I've got various problems I came across and how to solve them. So straight away we've got a bamboo stake here, which has done its job. In the early days, these are really good for keeping the tree upright and stable, and sort of directing the growth in the right direction. You can find with the wind they can sort of blow around and loosen up in the soil, and you can have problems. But that's done its job for a while back now. It's no purpose, so there's no point in having there, to be absolutely honest. It's a really good opportunity here to see the structure of the tree before the leaves fully appear. And if you've got branches like that, one crossing another, you have got an opportunity to prune them at this phase. I think it's a really sort of good time to prune actually, because the tree's in a growth phase. It's going to heal very quickly and not suffer too much damage. I'm not into pruning. I'd rather leave the tree alone to sort of do its thing. Though we'll have a look later on about sort of pruning off some dead wood, some dieback, and that's absolutely fine really. But yeah, this is a really good time to do pruning if you so wish from a sort of aesthetic point of view. And that's your choice, to be honest. So we've clearly got a lot of sort of litter down here. We've got old leaves, we've got bark, the old mulch that was used in previous years, and it can just make it all look a bit untidy, to be honest with you. Again, some people might leave some of this for that effect if that's what you're looking for. Personally, I like to give it a good tidy up and a bit of gardening and a bit of a clean really. So the bucket there will get full very quickly as I go through this little process. But it's just a way of sort of making sure that we're in the right place and looking good for the new season. Label there is completely legible, so that has to go, or that needs to be replaced or refreshed, so we'll do that. And here we can see with all the mulch and the top stuff removed, we can really see what's going on, and I think that's really important. So we haven't got any sort of roots sticking out. We can spread the compost around more evenly. Sometimes through perhaps watering and being lazy like me and not using a rose, we can sort of erode into the compost a little bit and make some holes in it. We can clearly inspect the root section there. So the bottom part is the original Acer palmatum tree root base of the tree, and then above it we can see that that's the actual tree itself, the cultivar in question. And that join looks fantastic. It's over the few years I've had the tree, it's completely disappeared now, and there's no problems there. And also another issue we'll come back to, there's nothing growing out of the rootstock, because occasionally you can get a piece of the original rootstock and that's growing some shoots coming out this way as well, but there's absolutely nothing there, so that's looking really good on this particular cultivar. I think there's also a great opportunity to assess the tree at this point for repotting. I've used a kind of wide angle lens here, so the pot probably looks a little smaller than it kind of is relative to the tree. I'd say just by inspection that's not unreasonable. The size of the pot compared to the tree seems okay. It's also good to note as well that there's no waterlogging. By stripping the bark off the top, you can sometimes see perhaps that there's sort of standing water in the pot, so the drainage hole's been blocked. So there's just an opportunity just to reflect on that and do something about it, repot it, clear the drainage hole, whatever if necessary. And here's the same tree from last year. I'm very lucky. I've got all these records of my trees and other trees of the same cultivar all over the UK really. And it's just good to kind of reflect on where we're heading with this. And I think that's perhaps a good indication as why this is a great time to do this maintenance work now. You can see the structure very well. You can see what's going on at the base of the tree. And this is what we're aiming for. So the tree's going to grow a load of leaves very, very soon. It's going to get very dense, and it's just a bit more awkward to work on at that point. We say from last year, the label's still there. I should have removed, and it's interesting without all the foliage in the way. It's just a lot easier to see the shape and the form of the tree and what we might do about it. Really, labelling, why not keep it up to date, keep it clear. But when you've got as many as I have, just keeping a record doesn't really hurt. And of course, over the winter when they're out of leaf, it can quite difficult to tell one from the other. So I think good labelling is just an asset, really. So just moving on now to feeding the trees. As I mentioned, great time of year to feed, using a feed that's going to slowly release during the growing season is excellent. And as you can see there, measure the pot size, get your feed ready, and just sprinkle it on top, to be honest with you. And what I then do is sort of go over, and you can work it into the top a little bit. This again is really valuable though, because you can kind of get a feel for how dense the roots are. If this is actually quite difficult, that's sort of saying, well, that tree has filled its pot with roots, to be honest with you, and it gives you an idea about whether it might be wise to repot. Whereas disturbing the surface, if it moves very easily, is a different ball game. So here we have the cereal sort of completed, the job's done. I put fresh mulch on there. I just throw the old stuff away and clear that out with all the weeds, etc., that were causing a problem. And I think it just gives me a bit of sense of pride, really. It looks pretty neat. Pop the little ornament in there as well, or something like that, and I just feel that's really set up for the next growing season. Again, so imperative to get this right. At this point, I'm not going to be touching these trees. I mean, that's the main thing. They're going to sit there. I'm going to water them. That's pretty much it, to be honest with you. So, we're already several minutes into this video, but honestly, it doesn't take that very long to do this. But having a look at tree by tree and just assessing it, I think is a really, really good idea. So why use mulch? It looks great. It inhibits weed growth, which is really important and keeps them tidy. It also is really, really useful to inhibit evaporation from the surface of the trees, because in the summer, if we get hot days, we want to preserve that water as much as possible. And as it rots down, it adds some acidity to the soil, which maples absolutely love. So here we have Cotonuito, another favourite of mine. I do say another favourite of mine quite a lot though, because I kind of love my trees. And as previously mentioned, as this is a follow-up to the March video, there's quite a lot of the old leaves on this tree that get stuck inside it. It's got very long strap-like leaves, really. It's called Linea lilobum, I believe. And that's lovely, but it does they do hang around. So this is, again, a great time of year to tidy it, get rid of the bits and pieces. You just pull them very gently and they come apart, really. You can even see some of the old ones sort of still at the bottom there from last year. I mean, if you've got stuff in the bottom like that, it's not really going to do any harm, to be honest. But, why not tidy them up? Why not have a go, I suppose, really? I've chosen to keep most of my acers in pots. I want to be able to control how they look and how they grow. And it just seems a shame not to go through that kind of tidying process. Now, what you can see there is some dead wood. Again, great time of year, early April, to have a look at this. It's clearly dead. It's brittle. It's snapped off really easily. And cosmetically, there's no sap in there. It's not going to cause a problem. So cosmetically, what a great time to kind of tidy it up and get rid of it, I suppose. But this is why I don't really like cutting back maples and pruning too much personally, because you do land up with sort of lots of bits of dead wood everywhere. What I'd like to say on the trees generally, though, is there is so little dieback this year. I'm really, really pleased. I have to say that's because I probably learnt my lessons and done things right last year, because this is the process I did last year that's paid dividends. And just noting here that because it's died back a bit in the middle, what's happened is it sort of spurred off another shoot in another direction. So a little bit of dieback on some of these cultivars actually sort of make them spread more and kind of make them more interesting to a point. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not the end of the world by all means. But it's just something that's a little bit unsightly there. And for the sake of, while I'm at it, just giving it a quick trim, kind of why not really. And just quickly to note that when trimming, I'd probably leave a couple of centimetres away from the end. It's just so I don't want to cut it too close to the tree and create even more dieback. So just quickly moving on around the garden, we've got Taylor here. This is also a funny graft. It sort of grows off at a particular direction. I might actually repot this at some point and take the opportunity to level up the whole tree, which is perfectly possible. But It does look kind of cool the way it is anyway, so we'll probably leave that. Here we've got another one, Aratama, which again is another relatively new addition. Lovely little tree. And this I'm really pleased about because it did suffer some problems last year with some dieback. It really struggled in the early months of sort of March, April. And that's because I overpotted it. Definitely my fault. And because it was so wet, the compost has got really soggy and sort of damaged the root system. Now, as you can see here, because I've failed to put mulch on the top of it, then that's what's happened. It's got weeds everywhere. So that's a really good reason why I use mulch, to be honest with you. Why I didn't do that, I don't know. But as you say, I've stripped it right back there. I've got all the kind of rubbish off the top, all the bits and pieces. It's also a little bit wobbly. So again, because you're sort of there with looking at every tree and expecting them, you can sort of have a little play and note these things. And look at how much of the compost there is mobile. It's moving around. It's obviously not packed full of roots. So, this is a tree I would not be repotting for sure this year, absolutely, because it hasn't even filled the current pot with its root system. So what I can do, though, is sort of amalgamate the soil a little bit, pack it down. If there's any uneven parts, just even it out a bit so it doesn't sort of accumulate water too much. So another little disaster here, we've got a pot that's actually fractured. Whether that's because it's fallen, I don't remember that. I think it's probably frost. It's kind of the water's got in it and caused some damage. These are supposed to be frost proof, but in this case they're clearly not. So thoughts on this tree. It's one of the trees I've had for a while. It's a blood good, so it grows quickly. So this is a tree that kind of everybody should have. It's a very common tree, but not in a bad way. It's absolutely lovely. But it needs some work here, so I'll certainly repot it and give it its due. If you note here, it's really tough trying to get this stake into the compost. So again, that's telling me this is full of roots, which is encouraging me to maybe go down the course of repotting it into something bigger. And then onto me Irene, which has got a really, really exposed little root system there. So this sort of happens sometimes. Again, watering over the season can sort of wash some of the compost to one side or away, or it's just compressed or whatever. So what we can do there is just add some more compost, just to sort of top it up. We don't want the compost sort of above the actual tree itself, only the roots. But again, only by removing the mulch, only by having a really good look at this, can we get a really good feel for it. I've no doubt bonsai enthusiasts would absolutely love that because it kind of looks like a mature tree. But I think for me, I'd just rather cover those up a little bit. As we can see, it's coming on really, really well. We're starting to see some new growth, which is always lovely. And again, just a great time of year to have a look and think and understand your trees and have a hands-on with them, really. I don't even like wearing gloves, to be honest with you. I quite like just getting in there and sort of feeling the texture and seeing what's going on and getting as much information sort of in a tactile way as kind of possible. And if you've actually sort of raised the soil slightly up in the middle, that's going to stop it getting wet. So I did get given some seedlings last year, and look at this, silly me, didn't put any mulch on the top, just sort of, well, they're only seedlings, I suppose, really. I was more interested in the pot size I was using, actually. I did a video on what's the optimal pot size to use. But lo and behold, they've all been fine. They've survived the winter brilliantly. And interesting, look at the leaf shapes. They are different with each one because they're seedlings. So we have got that sort of genetic randomness about them. And for those of you that may be new to maples and stuff like that, it's perfectly okay to grow seedlings like this, and they'll usually do very, very well. But when I'm talking about particular cultivars like this Hub's Red Willow there, that has actually got a sort of seedlings root system, but on top of which there is a grafted tree. And in this way, the same characteristics can be preserved across decades or even centuries, to be honest with you. So we know that this is going to have a particular sort of shape to it, a form to it. And this has really long strap-like red leaves, which I just love, really. So the grafting process just allows for a really good root system that's also disease resistant as well, because it's kind of on a wild, like a rose, really. It's on a wild rose root system, or a wild maple root system. But you get to sort of have a tree that we can know what it's going to turn into pretty much, and how it's going to look, to be honest with you. So just a quick note here, I'm just loosening these off and making sure they're not too tight. Unfortunately, you can forget these and they can sort of make a mark and burn into the bark, and they are quite strong actually. There's also, which is very characteristic and something to look out for, these little red leaves at the bottom, which is really curious on this particular tree. So this is a contifolium, absolutely gorgeous little maple. Again, something unusual, something different. What the red leaves actually are is the parent tree, the root system tree, which is usually Acer palmatum palmatum to be precise. It's actually growing in some little leaves, which is being naughty. So we don't want those. It's coming right from the base there. So honestly, the best thing to do is just remove them, because we don't want that competing with the main tree that we've kind of paid for, I suppose, and the look that we want. So as much as the poor thing is trying to have a little bit of growth there, best thing to do is just sort of either use some secateurs and pinch them out, or just pinch them out like that. Really, absolutely fine, sorted. But just nipping it in the bud quite literally really works very well indeed. Now I must say I do find these pinky leaf trees very finicky. They don't like too much sun. They do love lots of shade. And with this one I've got it in a better location, but silly me, I've really got it in the wrong pot. A kind of whoops, I've done it again sort of scenario, I'm afraid. This is interesting. It's got a bit waterlogged. It retains moisture a bit too well. And I think that just promotes sort of growth on the top of the planter there, which is not great. So if I get round to it, I will replant this into a very, very similar sized but porous pot, because that just does better really. Moving on now to an Acer dissectum. And I think just a basic dissectum Acer looks absolutely brilliant. It's not a very fancy cultivar or anything, but can be very good. And you can see how much this has grown in the sort of 4 or 5 years that I've owned the tree. That's the little stake that was originally there to kind of hold it up. Well, it's completely the opposite way around now. The tree's holding the stake up, so that's of no use, so we can get rid of that. And there is a little mark there that it's made. It's not really didn't do any harm, but you don't want that to continue, so let's get that gone really. And just to emphasise that when a tree's of that size, it's really going to fill the pot with roots, and that's going to give it massive stability and just improve things overall really. So I don't think staking is particularly necessary at that point.